Today on Powerdrift, we have a racing motorcycle. Is it fast? Is it good? Is it fun? Welcome to Powerdrift. If you haven't, please do subscribe, hit the bell notification icon, like and share. And today that's important because we have a very special motorcycle. And let's talk about the theme of the story, racing motorcycles. Racing began when human beings with motorcycles decided to find out who could go faster. Then things got serious. So they started removing everything that was extra on the motorcycle so they could reduce weight, focus the motorcycle more and go faster, right? Then racing got really complicated because they brought technology into it, electronics into it, and today's race bikes are really expensive, really fast. They're very satisfying machines, don't get me wrong, but they're also extremely complicated. But this race bike is different. This is the brand new Royal Enfield Continental GT R650, which takes you back to the old days of racing because this is a really old school racer. It's not got anything complicated on it, and in that sense, I am really excited to ride it because it should feel like an old school race bike should. And if anybody can do it correctly, I think it would be Royal Enfield. And the first thing I want to talk about is how good looking is this motorcycle. Now in terms of bodywork, this is essentially a Continental GT with very few changes if at all. But the addition of this little fairing, I think it looks absolutely marvelous to look at, especially when the racers are out on the racetrack. Remember, this bike is going to be raced in the Continental GT Cup. When they're out on the racetrack, plugging away at the corners, trying to go as hard as possible, this just looks beautiful. And at the bottom, there is a belly pan, which also adds to the aesthetics of the motorcycle. But remember, in racing, the belly pan's job, and all racing motorcycles have belly pans, is to contain any fluids that leak out so that if there is an incident, as little of fluid falls on the racetrack as possible. But at the belly pan and this fairing together, lower clip-ons, higher set foot pegs, this motorcycle looks absolutely delicious to me and I can't wait to ride it. But before we ride, we must talk about what Royal Enfield has done with this motorcycle. A lot of work has gone into reducing the weight of the motorcycle as you would do with any racing motorcycle. Today's motorcycles, a lot of the weight is in the exhaust because of the emission norms and stuff, so no surprise, this motorcycle has a custom exhaust set. These are stainless steel pipes, and what they basically mean is 24 kilos is how much this is lighter, 14 of those are coming straight from the exhaust. The rest of the weight loss is small things like the removal of the electrics, the headlight, indicators and all of that stuff. Together, this motorcycle is a substantial 24 kilos lighter than stock. So the engine, it's not been modified in any significant way. The engine of the GT R650 is completely stock and Royal Enfield is mulling a remap later on. But as it is, it'll already hit 160 down the main straight and 150 kilometers an hour on the back straight. That is fast. There is a new smaller sprocket at the front, and the reason is Curry Motor Speedway, where we are right now, is a tight and twisty technical circuit. And what you want to do is to be able to get to the limiter in 6th on the longest straight so that you're using all of the available performance of the bike. And from stock to this racetrack, they needed to gear the motorcycle down. You can bet that when they go to the BIC, which is a much faster, much bigger circuit with lots of long straights, this motorcycle's gearing will go in the other direction and they'll raise the gearing again. Sprocketing changes on racing motorcycles is a fact of life. They all do it to be able to ensure that the racer has maximum performance available whenever they need to ride it. The other changes are relatively small, so you've got lower clip-ons and higher foot pegs, ground clearance as well as the racing tuck comes from that. There are updates to the suspension. So the rear shocks, they don't have the progressive springs anymore, they have linear springs because racers will just completely go past the soft part of the progressive spring, so there's no reason to have it. So these are a little bit stiffer and you can play with the preload if you're racing this motorcycle. At the front, similarly, they've changed the fluid so that the compression is a little bit higher, and they've added these preload adjustable caps, which means if you're a heavier or a lighter rider or just prefer a different kind of feel from your motorcycle, you have a little bit of adjustability left. The final two changes, the speedometer has been nixed, it does not work. The meter is still there but it doesn't work because to a racer, a speedometer is really a distraction. It serves absolutely no purpose at all. And finally, the brake fluid has been upgraded because in the racing application, stock fluids can boil over and you can have brake fade, and therefore you do need race brake fluid, which is what this motorcycle is running. So that's how the motorcycle comes together, and now it's time to ride. Are you ready for the show? And let's not forget, it's got racing tires as well. So when you take the motorcycle on track for the first time, the first impression you have is of weight. And that's not from the reference point of the Continental GT, it's substantially lighter than that and you can feel it. It's from the reference point of what is currently raced in India, which are 300-400cc modern motorcycles, which are quite a bit lighter than this one. But Once you get used to that sense of weight and the idea that I have to push quite a bit on the handlebar to make it turn and stuff, then you discover a motorcycle that is spectacularly old school. So you have to give this motorcycle time. You can't flick it into a corner like you would do with a lighter motorcycle. It sort of gracefully curves, and you have to give it a little bit of space for that. These tires are super grippy, so once you're in the corner, it's a really stable motorcycle. You can afford to make mistakes with this motorcycle. It will forgive most of them. And you have this sense of riding something that really belongs in the 70s and 80s, but is pure and focused as a race motorcycle from then would be the fact that Royal Enfield are able to do a modern motorcycle that feels that kind of old school, I think is spectacular. But don't get me wrong, race motorcycles are not always easy to ride, and neither is this. This is a really physical motorcycle. It requires you to bring a lot of fitness to really push it around the racetrack and set fast lap times. But when you bring all of that to the table, it responds beautifully, and we were all surprised to note that the racers riding these bikes were within 3 or 4 seconds of the current highly tuned 5 to 8 lakh rupee kind of tune 300-400cc motorcycles, which for a motorcycle running a stock engine is absolutely spectacular when you account for the fact that this motorcycle must be something like 50 kilos heavier than those race bikes. As a package, this is a really satisfying motorcycle to ride, but it's not like a modern bike at all, and I really like that contrast between the two sides of this picture. So that's the story of the Continental GT R650. I have not talked about potholes because this is a racing motorcycle, ride quality is not important, and racers will usually sacrifice comfort for performance, and this motorcycle is absolutely brilliant at it. Now the question that you will ask me, and I know that you will ask me this, is can you buy this fairing, that belly pan as a kit? And honestly the answer is at the moment no. The GT Cup, where this motorcycle will race, is in season 1. Royal Enfield expects to have multiple seasons over the coming years, and what you can do to get an experience of this motorcycle is apply to become a racer. The selection criteria are pretty simple. To succeed as an applicant, all you have to have is either a previous race license, or you should have done a few track days or gone to an accredited school, which basically tells them that you have been on track and you know what the etiquette is like. And then you come to the selection event, prove that you're within the top 18 or 20, whatever the number turns out to be for season 2, by setting the fastest lap time you can in 5 laps. And once you're done that, if you qualify for the 18, you're on for the race season. In that sense, to go to race, all you have to have is some experience, gloves, boots, helmets, and the ability to show up at the racetrack and go racing. I don't think it can get simpler than that, and that is perfect because race bikes, I don't think, get simpler than that. Thank you so much for watching. This is Powerdrift. If you like this video, please do share it with your friends, and do hit the 2 buttons we love you to hit: subscribe and the bell notification icon. Thank you so much for watching.